I never imagined I'd hear the words, "You might have cancer." Those words stopped me in my tracks. In an instant, life felt fragile, uncertain, and frightening. Yet in that moment of fear, God was already there, steady, near, and writing a story far greater than my pain. A story not of defeat, but of his presence, his power, and his glory. We all walk through dark valleys in life. Many of those dark valleys test our faith and shake the foundation of what we believe. They often come unannounced, as mine did, right when everything seems to be falling into place. But it's in those deep, dark valleys that we discover something sacred. God is closer than we ever imagined. You see, my cancer journey was never just about cancer. It was about trusting God's plan. Christ, who never left my side, Christ who held my family together when we felt like falling apart, and Christ who turned my darkest valleys into a testimony of his unfailing love. To truly set the scene, let's go back to 2011. Adam and I had been married for just 2.5 years, still newlyweds, and were settled into our second duty station at Fort Bliss in the desert city of El Paso, Texas. That year was meant to be one of new beginnings. Adam was preparing for deployment to Afghanistan in September, and I was eagerly awaiting the arrival of our first child in October. But as we would soon discover, God had a very different plan, one we never could have written ourselves. On the morning of September 12th, I woke up to something no expectant mother ever wants to see: bleeding. Panic and fear washed over me as I called my mom, who calmly but firmly told me to get to the hospital right away. Adam, unfortunately, was tied up in pre-deployment testing, and I could not reach him. I remember feeling scared and afraid, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on every mile as I drove myself to the hospital. When I arrived, the nurses quickly admitted me, and I was already 4 centimeters dilated. My heart sank. As I lay there trying to stay calm, my phone buzzed with a random text from a dear friend and fellow military spouse. I told her what was happening, and without hesitation, she rushed to be by my side. She became my strength in that moment, holding my hand. By noon, we finally contacted Adam, just in time for the birth. The doctors began preparing us for emergency C-section, but by God's grace, it wasn't needed. Only after a few pushes, our tiny miracle, Mackenzie, came into the world. At just 33 weeks. I'll never forget the sound of her first cry, fragile yet fierce. Just 13 days later, Adam deployed to Afghanistan, leaving behind his newborn daughter, who was still fighting and growing in the NICU. Those days were a whirlwind of emotions: pride, fear, gratitude, and heartbreak, all tangled together. Yet even in the midst of the unknown, I could see God's fingerprints all over our story. Adam was never supposed to be there for Mackenzie's birth. His deployment had him leaving before she was due, but God rearranged everything. Against all odds, Adam was able to hold his baby girl in his arms before heading off to war. It was a moment of divine timing, one final embrace before stepping into the uncertainty of battle, a reminder that even in the chaos, God's plan is perfect. Fast forward to July 29, 2012. Adam finally came home from his deployment. I can still remember the feeling. My heart was pounding with joy and relief as I saw him step off that plane. After months of prayers, sleepless nights, and counting down the days, we were finally together again. We could finally be a family. But as beautiful as this reunion was, it wasn't easy. For over 10 long months, I had been doing life on my own, just me and Mackenzie. She only knew my voice, my rhythm, my way of doing things. Adam was a stranger to her, even though he was her father and she saw him only through the computer. Adam was also going through his own personal challenges due to the effects of war trauma. We were relearning how to live together, to share space, to build what deployment has separated. It took patience, grace, and a lot of love. Those first few weeks were filled with tears and laughter, frustrations and healing. But through it all, I could see God gently stitching our family back together. one moment at a time. In the months leading to Adam's return from Afghanistan, something began to change within me. I started getting daily migraines, pain so intense that I couldn't even care for Mackenzie at times. I remember laying in my darkened bedroom, pillows pressed over my head, praying for the pounding and nausea to stop, while someone else had to watch my baby. It was more than just exhaustion. Something deep down inside me knew something wasn't right. Then came the dry cough and the dull ache in my chest that would come and go. I went to the doctor again and again, desperate for answers, but each time I was sent home with the same explanations. It's just bronchitis, or you're probably just stressed, adjusting to your husband coming home soon. I wanted to believe them, but in my heart, I knew this wasn't just stress. Something was happening inside me that no one could see yet. September 2012 was supposed to be a month of joy. We had just celebrated Mackenzie's first birthday, a milestone that filled our hearts with gratitude. Adam had been home for 1 month, and life felt like it was getting back to normal again. But just a few weeks later, everything began to change. On September 28, 2012, I called the nurse advice line because my cough had grown worse. The nurse barely let me finish talking before saying she could hear the struggle in my voice and that I needed to be seen immediately. Adam had a military event that evening, and we told ourselves we'd just swing by the ER really quick before heading to the event. I remember walking upstairs to grab a few things for Kenzie before we left, and suddenly I couldn't catch my breath. Halfway up the stairs, my chest tightened and I had to stop. One simple flight of stairs left me gasping. Little did I know that after we left our house, that would be the last time I would be there. Deep down, something in me whispered that life was about to change again. Once we arrived at the ER, I mentioned chest pain and they took me back right away. What followed felt like a blur. Test after test, wires and monitors everywhere, nurses moving with quiet urgency. They did blood work, a chest x-ray, the usual steps, I thought. Then a doctor walked in, holding a chart, his tone calm but uncertain. He said, "You're pregnant." I just stared at him. Pregnant? I knew I wasn't. But he went on to explain that my HCG, which is the pregnancy hormone, was extremely elevated, like twins elevated. I would later find out that a high HCG would indicate cancer activity for my type of cancer. Confused, they ordered an internal ultrasound. I laid there on that cold table for what felt like forever as the technician searched and searched for nearly 40 minutes, passing in silence. I already knew what they would find, or rather, what he wouldn't find. There was no baby. The room felt heavy with unanswered questions. Nurses came and went, whispering in the hallway, glancing at monitors, avoiding eye contact. Time seemed so slow. Then finally, another doctor entered. His face was serious, his words deliberate. He looked at me and said the sentence that would change everything, words no one ever wants to hear. "You might have cancer." In that moment, the air left the room. My heart pounded and everything around me faded into a blur. I could barely breathe. All I could think was, how could this be happening? The chest x-ray revealed what no one expected. Both of my lungs were filled with multiple masses, some the size of softballs. Suddenly, everything made sense. The coughing, the chest pain, the breathlessness going up the stairs. But knowing didn't make it any easier to bear. I sat there in stunned silence as the doctor explained, but his words were blurred together. My mind was spinning. Masses, lungs, cancer? I could hardly comprehend it. Just days before we celebrated Mackenzie's first birthday, Adam was finally home. We were finally a family again, whole, together, happy, and now this. Tears welled up as the only thought running through my head was, Mackenzie. Would she lose her mommy at such a young age and never know who I was? Would Adam have to change his whole life to suddenly become a single father? How could life shift so suddenly, from laughter and milestones to fear and uncertainty? I was speechless, shocked, and utterly terrified. The next few days in the hospital dragged on like an eternity. Each hour felt heavier than the last. During the day, Adam would come with Mackenzie, trying to bring a sense of normalcy to the sterile hospital room. But when night fell, the loneliness hit hardest. I would lie there in the dark, tears slipping down my face, terrified of what tomorrow might bring. The silence was deafening, just me, my thoughts, and the unknown. Adam was doing his best to hold it all together. Overnight, he had to step into full-time fatherhood, caring for a baby who barely knew him, while trying to stay strong for me. I could see the worry in his eyes, even when he tried to smile. We were both scared, deeply, silently scared. The doctors confirmed I had cancer, but they didn't yet know what kind. More tests followed. I underwent a lung biopsy, and when the results came back, the words hit like a storm. Stage 4 choriocarcinoma. This is a rare and aggressive type of ovarian cancer that often only occurs in 1 to 40 and to 50,000 pregnancies. Mine was even more rare since I was stage 4. And the reason I was stage 4, after finding out more scans, CT and MRI, because I not only had spots in my lungs, but I also had spots in my liver and on my sternum as well. The doctors at the hospital did their research, and soon it became clear that no one in El Paso had experience of treating my rare type of cancer, and many of the doctors had never even heard of it. The doctors gave me 2 treatment options, MD Anderson in Houston, Texas, or Walter Reed National Military Medical Center in Bethesda, Maryland. And this is where the light bulb went off in my head, and I could see God's hand guide my cancer journey in the midst of all of that. Adam is from Houston, his family is there. And I was born and raised in Maryland, and my family was there. So in the midst of fear, God was already preparing the path. At first, we chose Houston, believing that MD Anderson, the world-renowned cancer center, was where I needed to be. But that wasn't God's plan. Our insurance wasn't accepted there. Instead, Walter Reed welcomed me with open arms. They had seen this cancer before, though never in someone as young as me. I was just 29 years old. They told me they were excited to take my case. And in that strange mix of fear and faith, I felt a quiet reassurance that I was exactly where God wanted me to be. I spent 5 long nights in the hospital there in El Paso before they were able to set up the transportation I needed to be transferred to Walter Reed. On October 3rd, 2012, I was medevaced from Texas to Maryland in that tiny plane. It was an approximate 1,800-mile journey and felt like I was stepping into the unknown. The plane was so tiny, as you can see, a small propeller aircraft that seemed almost fragile against the vast sky. If I wouldn't have been out of it, I probably would have not wanted to get on that. It was just the pilot, the co-pilot, a nurse, and me lying flat on a hospital bed inside that plane, leaving behind everything familiar. Adam and Mackenzie were not allowed to come. That was the hardest part. I remember the tears that burned in my eyes as I said goodbye, not knowing when or if I'd ever see them again. I felt so small, so helpless, yet I knew I had to keep going. The pain from my lung biopsy had grown unbearable by then. My back spasms were so intense that no medication seemed to touch them. Before takeoff, they gave me something strong enough to let me sleep through the flight. I remember closing my eyes, with the hum of the propellers fading into the background, and whispering a prayer that God would carry me safely through. The next thing I knew, we had landed. I opened my eyes to see the outline of the runway and felt the rush of cold air as they moved me from the plane into the back of an ambulance. My body was weak, my spirit heavy. But even in that moment of fear and exhaustion, I felt a quiet peace. I knew God was already ahead of me and already prepared the next steps in Maryland. When I arrived at Walter Reed Hospital and was wheeled up to the cancer ward, a wave of warmth enveloped me. All the nurses were waiting, their faces lit with genuine kindness and compassion, making me feel as if I had stepped into a sanctuary of hope. As I entered my room, my heart swelled with emotion at the sight of my parents. Being a military spouse often means very long stretches of separation from family. In that moment, I couldn't help but wish it hadn't taken such difficult circumstances for us to be together. Their presence was both a comfort and a bittersweet reminder of the love that distances often keep at bay. My mom stayed by my side in the hospital until Adam arrived. The next day, I began my first cycle of chemotherapy, a jarring reality that they needed to start immediately to shrink the masses stealing my breath. I couldn't leave until my oxygen levels returned to normal, a reminder of my fragile situation. I had been on oxygen ever since I went to the hospital in El Paso. Many doctors visited, but it was my amazing nurse, Sarah, who truly made a difference, explaining everything and answering our questions with genuine care. To this day, I continue to keep in contact with Sarah. During that first chemo session, a few friends and family came to visit with me. Jen, a close high school friend, brought a framed photo, this photo, and said, "Keep this by your bedside. Look at it whenever you feel like giving up. Always remember that that little girl needs her mommy." Her words pierced my heart, grounding me in my fight and reminding me that I wasn't just battling for myself. I was battling for my little girl. A couple of days later, Adam and Mackenzie finally arrived, and seeing them filled me with a profound sense of warmth and comfort. Adam stayed by my side from that day forward, a solid rock during my storm, while my mom took Mackenzie to my uncle and aunt's home. They had graciously opened their doors to us, offering a safe haven while I navigated this challenging journey. Their home was only located about 30 minutes from the hospital, a small blessing that felt like a gentle reminder of how God was working in my dark valley. In those moments, surrounded by family, I felt a flicker of hope, the realization that love and support would carry me through whatever lay ahead. When I was finally able to leave the hospital, all I wanted to do was hold Mackenzie close. She was still so little, too young to understand what was happening, yet her presence brought me more healing than any medicine could. When she'd curl up on my chest and drift off to sleep, her heartbeat against mine was the comfort and strength we both needed. Right after my second cycle, round 1 of chemotherapy, I began to feel a strange tingling on my scalp, and soon my hair started to fall. I knew this moment would come, but knowing didn't make it any easier. One afternoon, I decided it was time to take that leap of courage and let it go. I sat on my aunt's back porch with a towel around my neck, and my cousin gently braided a small section of my hair, tied it off, and placed it in a Ziploc bag, a keepsake of a piece of me, just like a child's first haircut. Adam took the clippers and began to shave, while my mom stepped inside, as she was too overcome with emotion to watch. I could feel the cool air on my scalp, the weight of loss and surrender in each pass of the clippers. Since I couldn't change what was happening, I chose to make the moment light. Adam and I laughed as he gave me silly hairstyles, a small spark of joy in a bittersweet moment. Also, because I've always been a proud Green Bay Packers fan, he even shaved their logo into the side of my head and left me with a little mohawk. It was my way of holding on to a piece of myself, a reminder that even in hard times, God gives us the strength to smile, to laugh, and to find joy in the middle of the storm. Chemotherapy became a regular part of my life, unfolding in a grueling rhythm of weekly treatments. One week, I would be an inpatient, spending the night in the hospital, and the next week, I'd endure long hours as an outpatient in the chemo room. Each 2-week period marked one exhausting cycle, and the hope was that 6 to 8 cycles would be enough to turn the tide. In November, I started having trouble with my pediatric PICC line that was placed in my arm. Here's a short video clip I took of myself at that time and what was happening.
It's early in the morning. I'm about to go to get a new PICC line put in under anesthesia. Just wanted to show my hair how it's falling so easy. All I have to do is go like that. This little baby was a baby PICC line, and it has decided to finally stop working. The blue line leaks, so I have to go and get a new one put in my arm, my other arm, or a chest port. And as you can see, I have gained quite a bit of weight in my face.
So I was going through lots of emotions. I saw that clip as I was looking for photos, and I figured it'd just be easier to show it than to explain it. But that PICC line in my arm, when I first got there, my veins were so small that they couldn't get anything bigger than that in there. So I had to put a pediatric one. So what I'm talking about there, I was about to go to be put under anesthesia and put an adult size into my vein. But even then, they said that it was pretty much putting a larger tube into a small hole. So that's why I had to be put under anesthesia. So after I received the PICC line, everything seemed to be going well until mid-December 2012, when I suddenly was struck with a fever and developed a blood clot in my collarbone area that sent me spiraling into the ER. They admitted me right away, but despite their efforts, my fever remained stubbornly high. The doctors feared the worst, thinking I might be septic, and before I knew it, I found myself in the ICU. The reality of having a tube down my throat, a lifeline to drain fluid from my lungs for testing, was terrified. And actually, during this photo, Adam had taken it, but they rushed him out right after that because I guess something was going wrong, so they didn't want him in there. After what felt like an eternity, they finally discovered the culprit. Some form of pneumonia had taken hold, and my persistent cough had returned with a vengeance. Because of this setback, I couldn't have chemo for 2 weeks, a bitter pill to swallow in a journey already filled with the highs and lows. Yet in the midst of this struggle, I clung to the belief that even through the pain and uncertainty, this was all part of God's greater story in my life. During this challenging time of hair loss and physical transformation, something heartbreaking unfolded. Mackenzie began to reject me and chose other people to cling to. This was one of the most hardest things I had to face. My little girl no longer recognized me without my hair, and it crushed me to realize that she would only acknowledge me fully when I wore a wig. Each night, I found myself sleeping alone, grappling with the sweat of chemotherapy. I felt isolated, unsure of how to bridge the widening gap between us, knowing that my condition made it unsafe for her or Adam to sleep near me. Despite the emotional turmoil, the chemo itself was initially going well. My cancer numbers were dropping close to zero, and I felt a flicker of hope, knowing I had only 3 more rounds to go before the end would be in sight. Yet, in April 2013, everything changed. My lab results showed that my tumor markers began to rise again, and disbelief washed over me. It was another painful setback on this already tumultuous journey. Previously, at diagnosis, scans had found no cancer in my brain, but as I fought to understand why my numbers were climbing, I insisted on another scan. Deep down, I knew I had to confront whatever shadow lingered within me, hoping desperately that the answers lay somewhere ahead. Throughout this entire trial, my grandma stood by me as my #1 prayer warrior. As fate would have it, she was also in the hospital battling her own health issues. And as all of us family were there at the hospital saying our goodbyes to her before she transitioned to hospice care, I received the call that shattered me. Dr. Stacey, my gynecologic oncologist, informed me that my brain scan results were in. The cancer had spread to my brain. In that moment, I felt a chasm open in my heart. I never shared this news with my grandma. The last thing she knew was that I was finally cancer-free. On April 26, 2013, as I prepared to have another round of chemo, only this time the highest dose possible, my world crumbled further as I got that call that my grandma had passed away. A spinal tap and a few scans later did confirm the unsettling truth. I had 2 metastatic brain lesions, one small one in the back of my brain and a larger one in the right frontal lobe. Overwhelmed by grief and uncertainty, I felt as though I was losing everything I held dear, and the struggle grew heavier with each passing day. The high-dose chemotherapy was necessary to penetrate the blood-brain barrier, but they had to be careful, as a person can only have so much. I would also undergo radiation surgery to target the 2 lesions. The radiation treatment felt daunting as I prepared myself for a 2-hour session that loomed ahead like a storm cloud. Just when my hair had finally started growing back, that one radiation treatment took it all away again in the radiation areas. Watching it fall out a second time felt like a cruel repeat. I couldn't help but think I'd be bald forever. It was such a helpless feeling, like another piece of myself was being stripped away. While I stayed behind for what hoped would be the last of my treatment, Adam went back to El Paso to pack up all our things with the movers and place them in storage until we knew where life would take us next. I missed him deeply, but on July 4th, 2013, he came back and completely surprised us. Seeing him walk through the door filled me with joy. He was home in time, not only to spend July 4th with us, but also to celebrate my 30th birthday with me a couple of days later. On July 24, 2013, I believed I was finally completing my last round of chemo. After what felt like an eternity of battling, the moment I had longed for arrived. My brain scan showed that 2 tumors were dead. Actually, the one in the back was completely gone, but the one in the front, they said, was dead. The relief washed over me, but it was tinged with the bittersweet understanding that the fight was far from over. In August 2013, Adam had to leave once again, this time to begin our move to Georgia, where he would be attending the captain's career course to advance his military career. It was hard to see him go, but he made sure everything was taken care of before he left. And then once he got to Georgia, he made sure all our belongings were unpacked and settled into their new place at Fort Benning. When I completed my recovery period and my tumor numbers continued to be 0, finally, on Mackenzie's 2nd birthday, we packed our bags from Maryland and headed to Georgia. Once we got settled, I was determined to reclaim a sense of normalcy and signed up for a gym, hiring a personal trainer to help me feel better in both body and spirit. Now, 3 months later, Thanksgiving week of 2013, my parents drove from Maryland to visit us in Georgia. The same day they arrived, I had my blood drawn to check my cancer levels. Anxiously, I texted my nurse for results, only to learn that my levels were elevated. I couldn't shake the anxiety of facing yet another setback. Why was this happening again? Desperate for answers, I called my nurse Sarah at Walter Reed, and she requested a full-body CT scan for the following week, coinciding with my 3-month checkup. She urged me not to worry and to focus on enjoying Thanksgiving with my family. That same night, 3 days before Thanksgiving, at 2:30 in the morning, I ventured downstairs to get Mackenzie some milk. But the next thing I knew, I awoke to paramedics hovering beside my bedside, calling my name, their faces a blur of concern. Adam had been jolted awake by the bed shaking, and in that terrifying moment, my body was unresponsive. My eyes were rolled back, I was stiff, and I was foaming at the mouth. I was told I had been unresponsive for about 5 minutes. The next clear memory I have is of being carried down our winding staircase, feeling the cold air of reality seep in again as I find myself in the back of an ambulance. Peering out, I noticed my parents' car in our driveway. Confused, I asked, "Why is their car here?" I had no recollection of them coming to the house that day. The shock of it all settled deep within me, a reminder that this battle was far from over, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on my heart. I remember lying in the hospital bed, my gaze fixed on my dad's worried face. He softly asked me if I was okay, and that's when I felt it. The chilling sensation of my head starting to nod uncontrollably, and my left arm started shaking as if it had a mind of its own. Experiencing a seizure was surreal, terrifying disconnect from my own body. Because Walter Reed had already been handling my case, the hospital in Georgia couldn't take me and referred me back to them. They cautioned me that I couldn't drive for 6 months and prescribed seizure medication that I had to take twice a day, each pill a reminder of the fragility of my situation. Oops. Mackenzie came to visit me in the hospital, her little footsteps lighting up the room. But when it was time for her to leave, she began to cry and through her tears said, "Come on, Mommy, let's go." She didn't want to leave me again. And hearing those words broke me in a way I cannot describe. Watching her walk away felt like my heart was being torn in two. Once again, I found myself facing another trial. After going lots more scans, I was finally discharged. We were able to have Thanksgiving dinner the next day, and supposedly I helped prepare the food, but I don't remember any of it, or eating it, nonetheless. The following morning, day after Thanksgiving, my parents, Mackenzie, and I left to travel up to Walter Reed Hospital. Unfortunately, Adam had to stay behind to finish a final exam and presentation for the course he was taking, and I have no idea how he managed to study and concentrate during that time. Yet, in my heart, I knew that God played a significant role in his success because he passed both with one of the highest scores in the class. His course was not complete, however, and once again, he had to put his career on hold to be with us as we faced this daunting next hurdle. After enduring countless tests and doctor's appointments, the hard truth settled in. The next step of my cancer journey was brain surgery. The surgery was scheduled for December 9, 2013, a date that loomed heavily in my mind, filled with uncertainty and fear. As I prepared for this pivotal moment, the weight of everything we had been through pressed down on me, mingling with a flicker of hope. One of the hardest parts of my journey was losing my grandma and how she never got to see me healthy again. But another very painful moment came that morning that I had to say goodbye to Mackenzie before my surgery. As I hugged her tightly, fear surged through me, filled with unknowns that swirled in my mind. Would I lose my memory? Would something go wrong during the surgery? Would she be left without a mother? I squeezed her tighter, but in her innocence, she pushed me away, wanting to go back to sleep. As we drove to the hospital, tears streamed down my face, the weight of uncertainty sinking deep into my heart. But just when I felt most alone, my childhood pastor, Pastor Bogus, and his wife made a remarkable journey, braving a snowstorm to be there with Adam, my family, and me at the hospital. He drove 2.5 hours in the snow to offer us his presence and pray before I was wheeled back into the operating room. That prayer wrapped around me like a warm embrace, infusing my spirit with a newfound sense of peace. In that moment, I felt a calm wash over me, filling me with faith that somehow everything would be okay. The doctor also reassured me, telling me that if I had to contend with a brain tumor, that it was in the best place to deal with it. A small comfort, yet one that grounded me in the hope of healing. You see, God had a plan. I remember waking up from this 5-hour surgery, feeling utterly nauseous, the world spinning around me. Yet despite the disorientation, I made remarkable progress, and to my amazement, 2 days later, I was told I could go home. The doctor noted how incredible this was, as most brain surgery patients typically remain in the hospital far longer. But I knew this was all God's work. With the tumor finally removed, reality set in. I now faced the grueling journey of even more chemotherapy and radiation. My doctors reached out to specialists across the country to find the best options for my situation. They were particularly concerned about whole brain radiation, given my age, and the potential future side effects that could follow if they went that route. In the end, they decided on targeted spot radiation, focused only on the area where the surgery had taken place. For about 10 days, starting on February 11, 2014, I endured daily radiation sessions, which you can see I was stapled to a table with that mask during each one. Could not move at all. It was suffocating almost. This made my hair located in the tumor resection area to begin to fall out in clumps. This was so disheartening. I had just begun to grow back my hair beautifully again, a bittersweet reminder of my battle. Alongside that, I had to start more high-dose chemotherapy, waiting for my cancer numbers to drop to 0. And then once that happened, it would only be 3 more cycles, they said. Then I could finally be done. Having to shave my head again was hard, but I was hopeful this would be the last time. Each step felt like a relentless climb, but deep down, I clung to the hope that this journey would lead me to the healing I desperately sought. By the time I started my radiation treatments, Adam had to return to Georgia to finish the course he had started. Thankfully, the military allowed him to join the next group of students so he could finish. So once more, my parents rearranged their work schedules to be there for me and take me to all my appointments. The weekly chemotherapy sessions continued, and I finally had my last treatment on May 6, 2014.
Okay, ready? Wrong song, hold on. So long, farewell, adieu, say goodbye, your hero's done, and so we stand aside.
It felt like a momentous milestone. Was my journey finally over? In the months that followed, I had to be monitored closely, undergoing yearly brain MRIs to ensure nothing had changed, along with weekly blood draws to check my cancer levels, until I received the clear to leave. After that, those visits transitioned to monthly blood draws, a routine that I had grown accustomed to, yet still found overwhelming. In August of 2014, Adam, Kenzie, and I would move to North Carolina, and in September 2014, Adam would once again deploy to Afghanistan and miss yet another of Kenzie's birthdays. He wasn't gone as long this time and came back a few months later. Every 3 months, I drove 6 hours from North Carolina back to Walter Reed for appointments with my gynecologic oncologist and neuro-oncologist. Fast forward to 2017. It was time for us to move again, and Hawaii emerged as a possible option. My heart sank at the thought of moving. However, because my unique medical care needs, it was almost impossible to move from the mainland. But the road to move to a new location that could treat my medical aftercare wasn't smooth. Tripler, here in Hawaii, initially denied my case. I had to navigate the frustrating bureaucracy and obtain extra approval. Fortunately, I discovered that my doctor at Tripler was familiar with my case and studied it while she was studying at Walter Reed. My case was so unique that medical students at Walter Reed continued to study it as a case study to treat other patients. After back and forth hurdles, we finally received the military approval to move here to Hawaii in 2017. This was where Mackenzie began kindergarten at Kalama'iki and where Adam and I became members of this church for the first time. Only 2 years later, another incredible opportunity emerged for Adam and his career, requiring us to move again, a year earlier than we'd anticipated. As we prepared to leave in July 2019, the weight of sadness settled in. We had forged deep friendships and created a beautiful life here in Hawaii with many of you as part of our lives, and saying goodbye was one of the hardest things we had to do. Mackenzie always asked why she didn't have a sibling and often prayed for one, and each time it broke our hearts a little more. From the very beginning of my diagnosis, the doctors had warned me that having another child would likely be impossible. They initially planned to perform a hysterectomy, but in the end, they decided against it, a choice I am forever grateful for. In early 2019, Adam and I took a leap of faith and consulted an infertility specialist to explore the possibility of getting pregnant after all the poison that had coursed through my body during treatment. After tests, the doctors delivered the bittersweet news. It was possible, but it would be a very difficult journey since my body didn't have many eggs left. Then miraculously, on my 5-year remission mark in May 2019, I received the life-changing news. I was pregnant. You see, God had a plan. However, the joy I felt was intertwined with a little bit of fear as the doctors needed to confirm it was a viable pregnancy and not a sign of my cancer returning, a reality that loomed in the back of my mind like a shadow. We waited a while to tell anyone, and especially Kenzie, as we couldn't bear to break her heart in case anything went wrong. We wrapped up a balloon with a note in it, and on her 8th birthday, she opened it up and popped the balloon to find a note that told her she was going to be a big sister. She was in shock and couldn't believe it. At her birthday party, we all cut the cake and saw the pink icing telling us we were having another girl. In January of 2020, Michaelan entered our lives while we were living in San Antonio, Texas. A beautiful bundle of craziness and joy who completed our family. In that moment, I knew I had a lot more life to live and love to give. I realized that God wasn't finished writing my story yet, and this new chapter was a testament to hope, resilience, and the unyielding power of faith. This past May 2025 marked 11 years since my last chemo treatment, a milestone that fills my heart with gratitude and a sense of triumph. To date, I've had no signs of reoccurrence, which feels nothing short of a miracle, as my doctors always called me a walking miracle. I still see my neurologist every year and will need to take seizure medication for life, but I'm still here, actively raising Mackenzie and Michaelan. I carry the weight of some side effects, tinnitus in my ears and thinner hair, but I recognize how blessed I am. When I think back to the long list of potential side effects I was warned about, I'm reminded of how much I have been spared. I often find myself wondering why others around me haven't survived their battles with cancer while I have. Guilt sometimes creeps in, and I question my purpose and why was I spared. But amid those questions, I hold on to the truth that God is not done with me yet. My story is still being written, layer by layer, filled with purpose, promise, and hope. If you take anything away from what I have shared today, know this: the same God who carried me through my darkest valley can also carry you through your own challenges and darkest valleys. His glory will always shine. Thank you for listening, and happy Sabbath.